If Penn State doesn't win a national championship next season, it's a disappointment.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko. I'm your host of the show. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. The national championship or bust mentality is justified here for this Penn State football team. And I know there are circumstantial things that can happen throughout the season, but with the setup that Penn State has, with the way that the university has gone all in on the football program, yes, it is absolutely justified, of course. Be a part of the conversation down in the comments section. So between Jim Knowles, between Penn State bringing back Drew Allar, Nicholas Singleton, Kaytron Allen, Dennis Sutton, Zach Seyko, Zane Durant, a lot of players that should have gone off to the NFL, they're running it back. As, you know, that's the mentality when you don't do it the year before. Michigan, Ohio State got close, but then the core nucleus all came back together. And why I say that it is a national championship, if Penn State doesn't win a national title for the first time in 40 years, and I know this is objectively speaking, right? Because I know 1994 and everything, but the way the college football world generally sees it, 1986 was the last time that Penn State had a national title. So with that being said, it's the fact that Penn State is bringing back Drew Allar, bringing back Singleton and Allen. Okay, I named all of the players, but it is going all in and saying that we are going to be serious contenders for the coordinators that we want to put the team as close to as possible. Because if Penn State wasn't looking at this as a national championship type of season, they wouldn't have gone and made a competitive offer for Jim Knowles. They would have promoted within for Anthony Poindexter, but they're not building a program passively anymore. They see this as a win now opportunity. They didn't just go and get any old defensive coordinator. They didn't just make any old promotion. That's not to be disrespectful to Anthony Poindexter, but they went and got the best defensive coordinator in all of college football. They create the best coordinator tandem in all of college football, and they needed over $3 million per year to do that. I know Jim Knowles is from Pennsylvania, but you went and poached one of the best defensive coordinators, the best defensive coordinator in all of college football from the team that has been a thorn in your side for the longest time. Tell me how this isn't a national title, how next season would not be a national title or be a disappointment if they did not win a national championship, because that's how I see it. It's the way that they have things set up with all the players that they return. They go and make a strong push for a caliber of defensive coordinator that Jim Knowles is. And they have all of this together. These setups, these foundations, these rosters don't happen by accident, and they don't happen very frequently. Penn State's still going to be competitive throughout the years, but who knows how long you have Andy Kotelnicki for? He could have been a head coach at West Virginia of all places, but he's back at Penn State for one more season. He could have been a head coach this offseason. You don't know if that opportunity is going to present itself next season. So you may or may not have Andy Kotelnicki for one more year. And he's been a huge answer for the offensive woes that Penn State saw under Mike Yurcich. You only have Drew Allar for one more season. Nicholas Singleton, Kaytron Allen, Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant, Zach Seyko, most likely an A.J. Harris as well. We'll see about Tony Rojas. I think he's going to get extremely better. My point is that you can't run it back another time. There's no opportunity here. This is the other than this opportunity. This is the best setup that Penn State has, and they're going all in. Like I said, they didn't just hire any old defensive coordinator. They went and got Jim Knowles. They took a chance by not trying to get, because they let Tom Allen, they could have gotten to a bidding war with Clemson and chose not to. They said that we might have something better suited at defensive coordinator by letting Tom Allen go. And that was top 15 defense conservatively speaking. I think that was a top 10 group. But Penn State still saw an opportunity to get better. They're also going to be aggressive in the spring transfer portal window. I don't think Penn State is finished as far as making moves and everything else, but you only have one chance with this setup. A fourth-year college football quarterback that's 3 consecutive years of starting. Second year with the same offensive coordinator. That is massive. 4-year co-starters at running back. I pointed this out multiple times, but I will point it out again. When was the last time you have seen a dynamic duo at running back, and especially, granted, the transfer portal and NIL aside, over the past decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, probably even longer than that, if ever, where 2 co-starters at running back return, because there's always been the allure of the NFL when you could go off after your 3rd season of college football. Singleton and Allen are both back. And that's unprecedented in its own right. Penn State's also returning 4 starting offensive linemen and probably has the most depth, I would say secondary in any position. In the two position groups that Penn State has the most depth at, offensive line, which is crazy to think because over the past decade, offensive line has rarely been a strength until later here. So that's a testament to Phil Troutman. And then the secondary as well. So that is why I say that it's national title or bust. Next season would be a disappointment if Penn State does not ultimately win the title. But that's not a condemnation of the program or anything else, because people are going to come back with, well, then you probably think that if James Franklin doesn't win a title that he should be fired. No, I don't think that. It's okay to admit that next season will be a disappointment if it doesn't go that way, if they don't hoist a college football playoff trophy at the end of it all. But Penn State still is showing a commitment to winning in this day and age of college football to James Franklin by going and getting the best resources available, creating the assets, making competitive offers to the coordinators that James Franklin has at the top of his big board. Andy Kotelnicki, Jim Knowles, those were Penn State's top coordinators in both cycles, and even going back to Manny Diaz and going back to Tom Allen. They have made it so that James Franklin has the best of the best and what he tells them, and then they go and make those competitive offers to the coordinators. So this is the new look of Penn State football. Not, well, we can give you some things, but we won't be financially competitive in other things. No, NIL is starting to get on the right track. They have upgraded the facilities, the amenities to be competitive across the college football landscape, in addition to what they are doing at coordinator. So this is the new look of Penn State football, where they have a commitment to winning, where they have a commitment to James Franklin because they are giving him everything and then some in terms of support. I really don't think they have a lot of excuses going in. Now, are there still some concerns that are remaining? Are there some what ifs? Absolutely. But I think that Penn State has one of the best setups going into next season, and you don't have that afterwards. You're going to turn to a first-year starting quarterback in Ethan Grunkemeyer. You're going to lose the 2 guys that have been your starting backfield for what will have been 4 consecutive years. A lot of the offensive linemen that is back is going to go off to the NFL, and then these defensive stars. Denai Dennis Sutton replaces the role of Abdul Carter. Zachy Wheatley started. He was one of the all-playoff. He was part of the all-playoff team with the way that he performed up to the national semifinal. And Penn State isn't far away. So yes, it is going to be a disappointment if they end up coming up short. But that's not to say that everything's wrong or everything's broken if they don't do that. I'm saying that they should win a national championship. They should be one of the favorites to do it. I know circumstantially things can happen, and that's going to be disappointing, and it will be framed appropriately, right? If there's an injury that pops up, something goes wrong that's unexpected, we're not going to talk about it like it's somebody else's fault. These are part of the game of football. It's still going to be disappointing across the board. But with where Penn State is, with what Penn State has returning, definitely the mentality should be national championship, because Penn State has not been closer to this point in time. And that's saying something because there were some really good teams in the James Franklin tenure. It also has to do with the fact that this is a 12-team playoff. So there's really no excuse for missing this 12-team playoff. We can be amenable, right? If things happen, matchups, anything else, Penn State's got to find a way, but this comes with the territory. Penn State putting it, the pressure is here because Penn State put itself in that territory. It is national championship aspirations because you went out and made the highest bid for the best defensive coordinator and took him away from the defending national champion. So the pressure is appropriate at this point in time. The expectations are sky high because of what you're returning at quarterback, running back, offensive line, on the defense. You go and get the best coordinators possible, so it's all justified. Let's address some of those remaining concerns, because while I don't think Penn State needs an elite wide receiver number one, and I know that's going to sound crazy, but I still do have my concerns with the wide receiver position, and I'll tell you more about it after a word from our sponsors. And today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Attending playoff games is an experience like no other. The energy, the excitement, and the connection with other fans, it's all unmatched. The thrill of seeing your favorite team clinch a playoff win live, it's a memory you'll never forget, and not just for any old playoff game, the big game as well. Yes, Game Time has tickets for the big game too, and this season, Game Time is making it easier to create those unforgettable moments at those playoff games, at the big game with Game Time Picks. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what matters. Being there, you can use Game Time Picks to grab tickets for any upcoming game in any sport, and it couldn't be any easier. There's the super deal that will give you incredible value for those amazing seats, and you can even preview the point of view from that spot you're thinking about before buying. And all-in pricing is a game changer, so no surprise fees at checkout, and tickets are backed by the Game Time guarantee that will give you complete peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account. Use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Let's address the obvious concerns that everybody is pointing out, and then I'll give you my personal concerns as well about this team. I still think, like I said, the foundation is there. Getting Drew Allar back is huge. Your ground game is set. Your offensive line, your running backs, and you can lean on that. Luke Reynolds, Khalil Dinkins, wide receivers, elite wide receiver play is not necessary. It'd be awesome. Who knows who's going to enter in the spring transfer portal window, but we're going off the assumption that this is the roster that Penn State has. So I think, I'll share my personal concerns first and then, speak to Jim Knowles, new defensive system, things like that. So I bring up wide receivers because Penn State doesn't have a lot of wide receiver depth. Kyron Hudson, I think, can be a capable number one wide receiver because you don't need him to be elite. I think he can be complementary to what this offense needs from him. He's a veteran playmaker. He can I've already mentioned this a lot. He can catch just about any football that you throw his way. If you put it in his vicinity, he will make the play. He doesn't. I think Pro Football Focus didn't register a drop to him this past season at USC. He's a capable blocker on the outside, and Penn State's going to need that in a run-heavy, run-first offense. And the reason I say they don't need an elite wide receiver number one, that's a need. That's not a need. It can be a want, and it's something they can address in the spring transfer portal window. Then this really puts them over the top, right, based on this conversation, but we're talking about what they have presently. Kyron Hudson gives them enough. However, after that, what happens if, again, knock on wood, I don't like speaking this into existence, but football is football, right? This is a violent game. This is a physical game. And if Kyron Hudson were to go down, Penn State doesn't have a lot of depth behind him. Now they're going to lean on the running backs. They're going to lean on the tight ends as well. I think Penn State is set where it is at running back and at tight end. Between Singleton, Allen, Cam Wallace is going to come back from injury. You have Quentin Martin, Corey Smith going into their redshirt freshman campaigns and got some playing experience this past season. Khalil Dinkins, Luke Reynolds should both be able to take a step forward. So no, you don't have Tyler Warren, but you have multiple tight ends that are capable and competent in this offense. Add in a Kaytron Hudson, add in a Devontae Ross who gives you a speed factor, but what after that at wide receiver? So it's not necessarily about the elite playmaker. Again, as nice as that would be, let's think realistically here that Penn State still needs depth. Liam Clifford, Tyseer Denmark, Anthony Ivy, I don't know that that's enough. I think Tyseer Denmark is coming on strong. Peter Gonzalez is coming back from an injury. He's part of that same recruiting class. Same thing with Josiah Brown. He was in developmental stages as a true freshman. Now he's a redshirt. I got to imagine that he's got to be one of the backups as that speedy wide receiver because Devontae Ross is going to be used in a way to keep defenses honest. Oh, you want to sell out for the run against Singleton and Allen? Well, we have Devontae Ross. Good luck keeping up with him. You got to keep a safety back and you can't stack the box. You get what I'm saying? So Devontae Ross and Kaytron Hudson give you specialty abilities, the blocking ability from Hudson, the ability to stretch the field with Ross. That's going to open things up for someone who just knows how to scheme offenses. You give him guys with specialty skill sets. Andy Kotelnicki will be able to do so much with his Dairy Queen Blizzard offense. And that's what I'm alluding to is that Andy Kotelnicki has the appropriate pieces to this offense. But if one of them goes down, can Tyseer Denmark step up? Can Liam Clifford step up? I just think you need to have more people that just offer a competitive balance. It's not that those guys are bad, but you want to be able to have the depth to continue to push people because then who's to say, right? What happens after that? Because then you're really throwing out inexperienced players that haven't played a lot of snaps in college football. Sure, they're veterans. They might be going into their third or fourth year. And Anthony Ivy, for example, but he hasn't played a lot of college football in the time being. So that spring transfer portal window, I think Penn State could realistically, if things go well, add a second, add a third, add a fourth transfer portal wide receiver in addition to Kaytron Hudson and Devontae Ross. You lost Trey Wallace. You lost Amari Evans. There is no shame in going and getting more complimentary wide receivers. But if they don't add that, oh, he's a 5-star according to On3, 24/7, the Rivals transfer portal rankings, he's a measly 3-star. He wasn't ranked that highly. There's a reason that Penn State will get them to commit. But don't be disappointed if it doesn't happen to be. And they might, again, it depends on who's available. It really depends on who's available. I'll mention defensive tackles as well. Defensive tackle depth, you are leaning on a lot of unproven talent. And there is plenty of talent. But is a Liam Andrews going to be able to step up? What do you have in a guy like Xavier Gilliam or Ty Blanding as players that were asked about when Alonzo Ford went down and Penn State opted to play with Zane Durant and Devon J. Thomas and just have them play 100% of snaps as opposed to rotating in guys like Gilliam and Blanding? I imagine they're going to take a step forward. They added some depth in Owen Wafel. I think this is where Jim Knowles becomes really important because you can get creative. They still have Caleb Artis. Alonzo Ford's going to come back from injury, but how soon will he be ready? Sooner rather than later. That's where defensive tackle gets really questionable. So I would not be surprised if Penn State attacks that position in the portal as well and gets some more depth. Maybe even somebody who can be a co-starter. Zane Durant and Alonzo Ford, when he's healthy, will be co-starters. I imagine your second players behind them on a 2-deep depth chart will be Gilliam and Blanding. And after that, you very well could see probably one more addition. But Jim Knowles gets so creative defensively that you maybe don't necessarily need all that defensive tackle depth. Denai Dennis Sutton and Smith Vilbert are fairly large defensive ends. So if people are worried about, oh, here we're going back to the fact that Penn State doesn't have a lot of size on the defensive line to go up against some of the bigger teams in college football, and the Big Ten in particular, I think that's where Jim Knowles can get creative. So let's address that as well. That Penn State won't be able to handle a Jim Knowles defense, that it's going to take 2-3 seasons by the time that he's able to implement it. They don't have the players to do it. That's a lot of Ohio State hearsay because their defense had to go under complete and total reconstruction for Jim Knowles to take over. And Penn State doesn't have that issue. Penn State is already starting from is there going to be a difference in terminology, in the way, in communication, and all of these other things? Yes, but Penn State already has the base of a 4.25, which Jim Knowles likes to operate out of. So are there going to be some tests? Is there going to be an adjustment period to see who responds? For example, he has what is known as a Leo. Jack Sawyer played that a lot. So is Denai Dennis Sutton going to be that? Is that Zariah Fisher? Is that Smith Vilbert? Probably Denai Dennis Sutton, because as we've seen, he can drop back into coverage and stuff, but it's this hybrid of a defensive line and an outside linebacker, so Penn State's going to run a 3-down defensive front with this Leo, who is kind of this jack of all trades edge defender, and Denai Dennis Sutton is perfect for that role. Who can you get as a backup? We'll see in time, but it's not like Penn State doesn't have the players to be able to run this, or that they haven't run it in the past, because Manny Diaz had elements of it. It was a hybrid defense between a 4-3 and a 4-2-5. Penn State fully invested into that with Tom Allen in the 4-2-5 this past season. It's all there. The building blocks are all there. So to say that there's going to be this long adjustment period, Penn State fans shouldn't be overly excited about Jim Knowles because they're going to just struggle under his defensive setup. The only thing that Penn State needs to be worried about is not where players fit into specific roles, but the execution of them. And I think having guys like A.J. Harris and Zach Wheatley in the back end of the defense, and that's not to mention Zion Tracy, Elliott Washington, the secondary is loaded. Davian Collins, just defensive backs in general who understand coverage assignments. They're smart players. And then superstars like Denai Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant, the emergence of a Tony Rojas are going to be key. And then veterans like Adam DeLuca. This defense is in a really good spot. Oh, and you get players who were injured a season ago, Zariah Fisher and Keon Wiley. I think a lot of people forgot about them and how capable they are. Jim Knowles and this defense should be one of the best in the Big Ten, should be one of the best in the country once everything fits together. So will there be an adjustment period? Absolutely. That's what spring football is for. That's what the August practices are for. But sooner rather than later, Penn State will have it figured out. So those are the initial concerns that certainly can be addressed, and it's not terrible. The situation for Penn State, they don't have to start from rock bottom there. They're in a really good spot defensively with Jim Knowles taking over for Tom Allen. Why did Jim Knowles leave Ohio State? Because all I heard is that this would never happen. This is the best setup. Ohio State, financially speaking, they gave him a national title. He should have left for Oklahoma because his fiance's in the area, but he ended up at Penn State. Let's figure it all out, because Ohio State says one thing, Jim Knowles' side of it says other things. Let's talk about how he ended up at Penn State after the break. So this is going to be an interesting segment because there's a lot of ways that this can go, but I want to address what is tangibly on the record, and then we'll talk about, tensions were boiling over, Ryan Day had to step in, Larry Johnson Sr. and Jim Knowles did not get along, and this had been going on for a while. Let's talk about what is actually present, and we know that Jim Knowles wanted to leave Ohio State. Whatever the actual reason was, we know that Jim Knowles wanted to get out of Columbus. Jim Knowles contacted Oklahoma and Brent Venables about that vacant defensive coordinator spot. So that's how that started, and that was in the middle of the playoff run. So this didn't happen after the season. This didn't happen after the national championship. This happened in the middle of the postseason where Jim Knowles was looking to exit. Penn State, in this small window, still had Tom Allen as their defensive coordinator. So it seemed like a slam dunk. Oklahoma has no competition here. He contacted us. We just have to lay this one up, right? For some basketball references. It's a walk-in touchdown. And then Penn State opens up, and this is where hindsight's 2020, but James Franklin has had Jim Knowles at the top of his defensive coordinator big board for the longest time. Shoot the shot. Ask that person out. Right? Take the risk. Take the dive. James Franklin, whether it was before Manny Diaz or Tom Allen, had always said timing is everything. But this is where it pays off. James Franklin made it apparent. I want you, Jim Knowles, to be the defensive coordinator here at Penn State. Not going to work out this time. Understandable. Penn State, timing is everything. Gets to an extent lucky, but you still have to recruit and negotiate to land a Manny Diaz. Okay, it doesn't just happen. You still have to be able to accomplish that. Same thing with Tom Allen. But James Franklin always made it apparent, and Jim Knowles remembered that. Jim Knowles took that into account. Penn State loses Tom Allen. Oh, there's a defensive coordinator vacancy. And now the conversation picks back up again. Jim Knowles is looking to leave Ohio State. Penn State is looking for a defensive coordinator. And then that's how all of this happens. Why he was trying to get out of Columbus, I can't confirm or deny anything myself. We know from talking to Jay from over at Locked On Buckeyes that Ryan Day had to intervene. There were recruiting issues about Larry Johnson not getting the defensive lineman that Jim Knowles wanted exactly over their tenure. And then there's the discrepancy because if you ask Jim Knowles' camp, right, family members, friends, they say that, oh, there was an issue after the Oregon game, and it wasn't until Ryan Day stepped in and gave total control. It depends on who you ask, because some people say that it was Larry Johnson when he got more control of the defense, that's when Ohio State went on a national championship run and the defense looked that much better. Of course, they made the changes before the Penn State game, right? They couldn't have waited until after the fact. Besides the point, joking aside. But you ask some people, they say it was Larry Johnson, had more influence, and the defense was able to correct itself. You ask people who are close to Jim Knowles, they say that no, Jim Knowles was given total control and that it was too much outside influence. Larry Johnson had too much say in the defense. And once Jim Knowles was given total control and was able to run the type of defense that he wanted, that's when Ohio State's defense went to a new level, a universal level where nobody could compete with them. They were the top defense for the 2024-25 season, postseason run. And then Jim Knowles gives them the national championship and says, you know what? After this, I'm all finished. I'm going to find another destination where I'm going to get more respect. And that's what happened at the end of the day. Penn State gave Jim Knowles the due respect. If that's in dollars, if that's in control and responsibility, because Penn State made the most competitive offer. Oklahoma and Notre Dame, reportedly speaking, offered $3 million to Knowles. Penn State offered 3.1. Now that's slightly above, but what's surprising is Ohio State offered something in the ballpark of 2.75, 2.8. Because you notice all the headlines in the weekend going into when the announcement was made that Knowles was leaving for Penn State, all the headlines from Ohio State publications said, Ohio State makes competitive offer to have Jim Knowles become the highest paid defensive coordinator in all of college football. Well, that sounds great, but that framing is a little deceptive. It's downright dishonest, because wherever Jim Knowles was going to go, he was going to become the highest paid defensive coordinator. He was going to become the highest paid coordinator, period. And one of the schools wasn't Ohio State. Notre Dame, Oklahoma made that pitch. Penn State made the ultimate pitch. Ohio State, where he was the defensive coordinator, helped lead them to a national title, and doesn't get the due respect. And then there's the rumor that they were ready to lock him out of the building. They wanted him to sign the contract, or he couldn't show up to the parade. Now that's all hearsay. I don't know what I believe in that regard. I know one person's going to say one thing, one's going to say the other. But what the conclusion that we can come to is that Penn State made the most competitive offer. James Franklin bided his time and was patient. What goes around comes around. Timing is everything. And it led to a strong mutual respect from James Franklin to Jim Knowles. Penn State made the strongest financial competitive offer that they could to show that, hey, we are committed to winning in this day and age of college football. And Ohio State, to an extent, did disrespect Jim Knowles in some sort of capacity. There were tensions. How significant, how strong those tensions were is up for debate. But they were there. They were present. And the fact that Jim Knowles was looking to get out of Columbus as soon as possible speaks volumes. So for the most part, that's how it all unfolded. And it's Penn State's gain at the end of the day. Somebody that has strong recruiting ties, family in the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, New Jersey area, right? This Jim Knowles belongs at Penn State. He doesn't belong at Oklahoma. He doesn't belong at Ohio State anymore. Go where you are supported, and that's at Penn State. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Thank you so much for checking out this episode and the support on this channel. Thank you for supporting us over here at Locked On Nittany Lions and making us your first listen and watch every single day. If you are new to the show, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, and wherever you get your podcast, please leave a like on this episode, share it with friends and family. And of course, your comments, your thoughts are always appreciated down in the comments section. Let me know what you think about all of this. Until next time, for conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams, not only Penn State football, but Penn State basketball, Penn State wrestling, keep it right here on Locked On Nittany Lions.